Hello, everybody. It is Best in the World Weekend, Ring of Honor Wrestling, but it's also Last Stop Penn Station. Ian Riccaboni. I'm in hard sell mode because this is the weekend, Carrie. Fans, Baltimore, the arena, Best in the World pay-per-view. I'm excited. I'm excited to be back live.
When this episode drops on Friday, it'll be a mere 48 hours.
About 36 hours-ish. Yeah.
So, yes, in Baltimore, upcoming this Sunday, I finally got down the UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, and they changed the name on me.
Chesapeake Bank Arena, yeah. They got a great corporate sponsorship. We're happy. Our home away from home, the UMBC Arena, it's a great venue. I'd love to hear what a concert would sound like. It's got great acoustics for the wrestling, the way the mat sounds, the way the music sounds. They probably do have some killer concerts as the world is opening back up, but the world is opening up in Baltimore, and we can't wait to see you there. We had a great watch along. We had some killer matches this weekend on TV. We have Violence Unlimited going against LFI, going against the Foundation, which is an appetizer for what we'll see at the pay-per-view, because we'll see Roosh defending the world title against Bandito, Jay Lethal and Brody King, EC3 and Flip Gordon. The Briscoes are there. You name it. You don't want to miss it.
How about, I got one for you.
Yeah.
PCO and Danhausen
right.
against Beer City.
Beer City and Brian Malone. A lot of tonnage in that match.
Right.
There's three men over 350 pounds in that match, Gary. And one that claims he's 400.
I like Danhausen. He's a nice boy, but I wouldn't mind seeing him getting smushed. Just for the hell of it.
Do you remember, I think it was in Massachusetts, where poor Naito got double smushed by Beer City and Brian Malone. The IWGP Heavyweight Champion you had to get the scraper and pull him off the mat.
Well, you could join us live in Baltimore, or we're available on Honor Club.
Yeah, Honor Club.
Fight TV.
Fight TV's great.
The good old fucking rush method.
You know what?
The good old pay-per-view.
I'll say this: Honor Club is a great value. It's $9.99 a month. You'll get the Philly shows if you sign up now. So we're coming to August. You get a month's worth, $9.99. Do that if you can. It's the best way. Fight TV. If you have Honor Club, it can link through there. You can put it right through your TV to have the traditional experience and watch it on your big screen. If you really want to give some more people some extra money, I think it's $39.99 on pay-per-view. Don't want to discourage that, but just know that there's some cheaper options like Honor Club, and then you get the whole back catalog. You get to see what Kerry launched with Ring of Honor 2002, 2003, 2004, now up, one of the great achievements during the pandemic. Also, some great moments from throughout Ring of Honor's history. So,
probably when they're listing the greatest achievements during the pandemic,
the vaccine,
the Pfizer vaccination.
Moderna's number 2.
They figured out about the vaccine in Wuhan. And they also just wanted to stop baseball pitchers from messing with the ball.
Police reform was good. The reforming spider attack, and then number 5, solid number 5, was getting the 2002 Honor Club settled once and for all.
It is good. And second to that is we have a special guest tonight.
Yes. Oh, how can we forget Mike G, the famed Mike G, Mike Greenblatt, Kerry's cousin who got him into wrestling, helped get him into music.
Former ROH publicist from 2004 until 2011.
Wow.
Man at the Bell.
Yeah.
I see him at
many great titles. I know off the top of my head, Seth Rollins, when Tyler Black wins the belt, he's there.
And not to mention the Samoa Joe Kobashi.
Right. Yeah. So Mike G, who has ties to Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor, of course, this weekend, Best in the World. Mike G, who's been Ring of Honor through and through. But today we're going to, on my questions, I got a lot of questions about Woodstock today, Kerry. So I anticipate going in the music direction.
Hey, he's been working on my autobiography. We've been working on it. So we'll see what's going on. So why don't we get to him?
Yeah, let's take a listen now to our interview with Mike G. Hello, everyone. It is our great pleasure to welcome at this time the esteemed Mike G. Mike G, the author of Woodstock Back to Yasgurs Farm. What an incredible book, 50 years after Woodstock. And you are the author of Last Stop Penn Station, or at least the, how would I frame this appropriately? The co-conspirator of Last Stop Penn Station. The book
equivalent of this podcast.
Yes. And we're looking forward to it because of the many stories you've heard here. There's so many more. And that transcript weighed about 20 pounds. How many folks have you interviewed so far for the book?
Dozens, literally dozens. But unlike the podcast, where every story is worth telling, in the book, every story is not worth telling. It's a different medium, and I've got to sandpaper it off and get Carrie's rough edges, a little more mass appeal style. But still, it's funny. It's irreverent.
If we left it up to him, I'm sucking one cock per page.
Incorrect. That's not true.
And an occasional vagina.
Well, I heard there's even more peeperies. We gotta get some interest in this book, Mike G. There's peeperies, there's show world, and
yeah, but more important, there's drug selling, there's ticket scalping, and the most important part, the last third of the book, changing the face of professional wrestling in America. You put them all together, and you're sitting next to them right now.
It's incredible. And you've sat next to some incredible people yourself. You know, you've done the Woodstock book, Back to Yasgurs Farm. But Carrie told me a real interesting story. You once went to Asbury Park, and you sat with my favorite artist of all time, Bruce Springsteen, and you spent the day with him. What is that like, going through the, you know, you're an esteemed music journalist. What's it like sitting down next to somebody like Bruce Springsteen, like some of your the more acclaimed artists?
And I'm going to interrupt, and I'm going to let Mike take over. It was on Bruce's 29th birthday, am I correct?
Yeah.
And Mike and his photographer, Bob, then working with the East Coast rocker, the Aquarian, was sent. What year? This is at the height of Springsteen's.
1978. He had been on the cover of Time and Newsweek. He had just been through a 3-year battle with his former manager where he wasn't allowed to tour or record. Darkness on the Edge of Town was waiting in the wings. And he had a big press party in New York City for the album that was due. And I was invited as editor of the Aquarian. So I buttonholed him. And I said, Bruce, you're the big New Jersey guy. I'm the big New Jersey editor. You've never interviewed with us.
Did he know who you were?
Yeah, he knew who I was, but he didn't realize that he never interviewed with the Aquarian. So he called his publicist over and he goes, Glenn, I gotta interview with him. Glenn Brunman, the former publicist at Columbia Records, goes, but Bruce, you're on a 6-month tour with only 1 day off, and it's your birthday to boot. So no, you can't interview with this guy. And Bruce says, he takes me off in the corner. He goes, listen, you meet me on the boardwalk to the bench, on the bench to the left of the casino arena at 2:00. I'll be there. Okay. So I got my photographer. We rolled down there. 2:00. We're waiting for Bruce. No Bruce. 3:00. No Bruce. I think maybe he's coming in disguise. Everybody I saw, is that Bruce? Is that Bruce? We talked to some girls. Yeah, we're waiting to meet Bruce Springsteen. And then we forgot about it. We figured it's a blown day.
Did you have a contact to his publicist or his manager? Or
he did it without the publicist's knowledge, without the manager's knowledge. He just did it on his own. Because he never interviewed with the Aquarian, and he wanted to show some solidarity because we've been writing about him since before he was Bruce Springsteen. He was in Steel Mill when we wrote about him first. And then we're trying to light matches to smoke some cigarettes. We're hunched over the matches. It's windy, and there's a hovering presence behind me. Oh, and there he is, 3 hours late. And he apologized. And he said, I'm sorry, man. And he showed up in a borrowed burnt orange Camaro. And we went for some coffee. And then we went on the bumper cars. And then we did a little wrestling on the beach. And then he took me to his, we played pinball. I beat him. And then he took me in the Camaro and he drove to the docks where his father labored on the loading docks. And he even we're sitting at a red light. And he even goes, "This is called a quarterback sneak." And he blows the light. And I couldn't believe it. And then we're on the highway and he's driving real fast. And I'm thinking, this is how Bruce Springsteen should be driving. And he goes, "You got to hear these songs." And he puts on the Animals song, "We Got to Get Out of This Place."
Yeah.
And he said to me, every song I've ever written in my whole life was a rewrite of this song.
Wow.
So, you know, I hear that song now by the Animals, written by Carole King and Jerry Goffin from the Brill Building. I always remember that day, but he wouldn't let me tape him.
Oh.
And so I kept waking up in the middle of the night thinking of things he said and writing it down. And then when I went to proof the story in 78 in October, because his birthday is September 29th, that was the day of the Bucky Dent home run to beat the Boston Red Sox in a one-game playoff for the entire season. And I was so excited about getting the hell home and watching that game, I forgot to put my byline on the piece. And it was published without my byline.
Wow.
Well, the word got out because that article is still heralded by the Springsteen freaks. Like in what was their
Backstreets magazine?
Backstreets,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, they reprinted it. Bruce said that December at the Capitol Theater backstage, he said it was his favorite article of any article that was ever written about him. But then we came to a bad falling out. And I'm persona non grata in the Springsteen camp.
What happened?
Well, you know how he would like to go jam with bands, right? Well, the word got out that he was going to jam with the Cats on a Smooth Surface, which featured his friend Bobby Bandiera, who was the lead guitarist to the Asbury Jukes. Yeah. Anyway, when word got out, he was going to jump on stage at the Soap Factory. WDHA, the Rock of North Jersey, said it on the radio. And thousands of people showed up at the gig and they're booing the band and they're calling for Bruce and he's peeking out and they're throwing bottles because he didn't do it. He ain't doing that. And I had sent Bob Source that night and I said, you better get a picture of Bruce or you're fired. He took the picture of Bruce. Bruce got so upset because this was the guy he spent his birthday with. To invade his privacy like that, he took the camera, he smashed it on the ground, and then he kidnapped my photographer. He threw him in the back of the car, and they went down Route 1 or whatever it was, and he taught him a lesson in privacy, and he kicked him out of the car on the highway.
Amazing.
And the reason I'm persona non grata is because I dared call up his camp and ask for a quote about that. And I never got one album or one invite to a concert. God forbid a ticket to his overpriced Broadway thing. Forget it. I can't get to first base with him anymore. That's my Springsteen story.
I was going to say, have you been around anything more exciting? I don't think anything could top that, though. Okay.
And again, yeah. How about getting introduced to Bob Dylan by Keith Richards? Backstage at the Lone Star Cafe when my client, I was a publicist, and Roy Buchanan was the artist. They asked Roy Buchanan to replace Brian Jones in the Rolling Stones. He said no, and it was on the eve of Live Aid in Philadelphia in 1985, and Keith and Dylan, Keith and one other guy backed up Dylan that day in Philadelphia, and I was talking to Keith Richards. He didn't want to talk to me. So he just said, here, meet Bob Dylan. And then I looked at Bob Dylan. I swear to you, Ian, I've met them all, and I never got flustered. But when I met Bob Dylan, instead of saying hello, I said, Bob Dylan.
Incredible. Yeah. So when you're at something like that, how do you maintain your composure? Because I've talked to Carrie about going to Show World and being with the Bouncing Beauties on the 4th floor and how Carrie kept his composure. But if you're in there, you said Bobby Bandiera. I'm a big Jukes fan. He's played with Bon Jovi. He does his own thing now down at the Shore. If I met Bobby Bandiera, I'd be excited. But if, if you're meeting somebody of that esteem even higher, I mean, these are A-list guys. Do you go in expecting to meet them? This was kind of a spur of the moment situation with Bob Dylan. I guess, what's the best interview you've lucked into?
Well, there was an Eagles concert at Giant Stadium, and they had a press party in the bowels of the stadium. And I went to the urinal, and I noticed that peeing next to me was Joe Walsh.
Oh,
and I'm like, and I had to get that scoop, man. And I started interviewing him while we were both, when we were at the, and he goes, man, don't be talking to me now. He goes, but we are having a press party in New York City tonight, so why don't you come to that? And he gave me all the details and so forth. And then that night, I apologized for being so obnoxious to ask him a question at the urinal. I mean, come on.
That's how I met Jim Ross. No joke. I met Jim Ross being next to him at the urinal. So
surprised with people you meet in urinals these days.
Yeah. I waited until we both were clear. I looked over and I kind of noticed it was him out of my periphery.
Well, there's a laundry list of celebrities Mike could talk about. I mean, here's a man you could throw a name out, like Elton John.
Elton John was having a party for his so-called retirement. He was going to retire from touring. John Lennon was still alive, living in the Dakota, hiding out, not doing much of anything. And his table was roped off with a silk curtain. And I had to get a quote from Elton John, but I wasn't allowed to. The publicist said he's not giving quotes. And I waited until the publicist left. And I ducked under the curtain and slid on my knees right in front of him while he was having his appetizer. And I stuck my tape recorder in his face. And I started asking him some questions. He obviously thought that this guy has some balls. So he gave me a 20-minute interview about his good friend John Lennon and why he's not going to get out anymore, and he's going to just stay in the Dakota and not do any more music, and I wish him well and so forth. And then he says to me, but I'm going to get him out. I'm going to get him out of the Dakota. And that was, of course, the famous concert that Carrie went to, that I did not go see. I believe Thanksgiving 74, when Whatever Gets You Through the Night turned out to be a #1 hit. And Elton John was involved in this lousy there was some kind of Beatles movie. The Peter Frampton was in it.
Yeah, right. The Bee Gees.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie.
Yeah. Elton did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So it was the perfect storm. And and that was the last time John Lennon ever played in front of an audience. And that was 1974.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's right. And then decades later, I'm sitting in Sean Lennon's house and I'm asking Sean about Elton John. And he told me that Elton John is his godfather. Huh. And Sean made me wait about an hour and I'm alone in his house. The publicist didn't do a very good job leaving a journalist alone in this guy's house. Anyway, I noticed the turntable and I wonder what album Sean Lennon has on his turntable. And I went over and I looked at it, and it was Tumbleweed Connection by Elton John. And he was really cool and really interesting and sophisticated and articulate and funny. And I loved my time with Sean. I had to ask him about Beautiful Boy. Is that it? Where at the end he goes, "Good night, Sean. Good night." And I asked him, well, how do you feel when you hear that song now? And his answer was interesting. Is like, he doesn't feel anything. He thinks of what he could have done better in the song. That's all he said. He hears a chord that wasn't quite right. But yeah, Sean was great.
Well, speaking of music, we talk a lot. There's a lot of music in Last Stop Penn Station.
There is.
Mike G is, last week when we were talking with Dave Lagreca, you asked, and Dave was talking about his brother and you speaking about your brother sort of turning you on to, they're a few years older.
Live shows, yeah.
Mike was that person for me. Hey, Mike was the first one in like 1967 or 8. He said, hey, there's this new thing. I go, what? FM radio. I'm like, what's that? He goes, well, I'm not sure, but it's these higher frequencies, but they have really good stations. And so I started listening to, New York freeform rock, WNEW FM, WOR FM at the time was all rock. And so the point being is Mike laid the groundwork for a lot of the music that I love. And he being a few years older than me, I wasn't of age to ever make it to the Fillmore. Mm-hmm. I would have had to be like, 12. But Mike was of age.
Oh, wow.
To go to, all these amazing shows. Let's talk about the Fillmore a little. Sure. I was thinking about this. Would you guys buy tickets in advance?
Yes. We would buy tickets after the show that we had just seen. And we would go to the box office and get our tickets for the next show, right then and there.
You're talking about the same night or the next week?
Whether it was the next month, whether it was in a couple of weeks, after we thrilled to some show at the Fillmore, before we left, we would buy tickets right there for our next show.
Did you you must have encountered groups that you had no idea who they were that might have went on to be megastars.
I'm trying to think. I remember the Fillmore had a thing for having outrageously diametrically opposed shows. Linda Ronstadt, the Woody Herman Big Band, and Pink Floyd. Same night.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, things like that. Just fabulous. 10 Years After was one of our big ones. We would always sit way up in the cheap seats. It was a small theater, so that you could see fine and hear fine. And the light show looked actually better from all the way up there. The Joshua Light Show always blew our minds. Of course, I actually, come to think of it, our minds were blown before we even stepped through the door. But that's okay. It was great. 10 Years After, I remember we got in the first or second row by the stage because we wanted to get really close to Alvin Lee. We loved Alvin Lee so much. And that particular 10 Years After show, we were tripping, which we usually were. And Alvin Lee's hair, he looked like a lion. I'll never forget that lion mane of hair. And he was the fastest guitarist out of all of them. I'll still say that today. Nobody played as fast as Alvin Lee. We loved Alvin Lee.
Did you see him before or after Woodstock? Were they kind of a known before? Wow, okay.
Yeah. I knew who he was when he played Woodstock.
Oh, very cool.
But there were other artists. The Allman Brothers played that famous set that resulted in that famous album live at the Fillmore. But the night before that, we saw them, and it was a first date. And that show, it was the late show. They had two shows at the Fillmore, 8:30 and like 11. And that late show didn't get out. I mean, I remember leaving that show in a brilliant, bright, blinding sunshine. Wow. It was the next morning, and they had played and played and played. And then I had to drive this girl back to West Orange, New Jersey. Her father was waiting up for us. I never did anything with her, but you couldn't convince him of that.
They must have finished with a 2-hour version of Whipping Post.
Very, very well made. This girl, who's now a sex therapist, tells me that I took her to see the Doors in Asbury Park. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. Really? Yet she swears I took her to see the Doors. Now, I saw the Doors at the Feld Forum, adjacent to the Garden.
Right.
And that was the thing about seeing the Doors, is that you never knew what was going to happen. And the Doors show, Jim Morrison was the type of cat. It was almost scary. You didn't know what was going to happen. The only lead singer that got even close to that sense of unexpected craziness was the first tour promoting Appetite for Destruction, was Axl Rose. He hearkened back to that Jim Morrison aesthetic of you didn't know what was going to happen with this guy. But then they turned to shit real fast on their second album. And forevermore.
Well, they had a huge climb. I mean, they played the Airport Road Club in Allentown, which couldn't have sat more than 250 people on that tour, and then they were in arenas 2 months later. I can't imagine what kind of success that would do to you.
Mike, were you at the very first Madison Square Garden? I read this book recently. It wasn't the Bill Graham autobiography, but it was about the history, an overview of the history of both Fillmore's East and West. And in the book, they talk, Bill Graham, who eventually became an arena concert promoter, declared the downfall of both Fillmores to be arena rock. And I think the first show at the Garden, and I think you were there, was Blind Faith.
I don't remember.
Okay.
A lot of things I don't remember, but I can tell you when Bill Graham got the idea and realized that he's going to have to close down both Fillmores because he saw the future. He's sitting on the stage at Woodstock in '69, and he realized that his brand of 3,500 seaters, 2,500 seaters, however, was going to be a thing of the past. He realized that day, Sunday afternoon at Woodstock, that he's going to close. Fillmore East closed within 10 months.
Wow.
And then he did the biggest tours in rock and roll history.
Right.
Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones. I mean, Bill Graham was the greatest.
Did you see Zeppelin at the Fillmore?
Didn't see Zeppelin at the Fillmore. I saw him at Madison Square Garden, and I didn't like him. And interestingly enough, neither did you. Exactly. You saw Led Zeppelin twice, and you didn't like him either time.
Back. I thought I made a mistake. I was only 16. And the next month was the Tull show, and all I knew of Tull was Aqualung, but I went. I didn't want to go because it was at the Garden. I'm like, it's not going to be any good. Led Zeppelin was at the Garden, and it didn't sound like the. But Tull did sound like the record. And I went back to see Zeppelin, I think, in '77, and I had the same experience. But
for some reason, they just were too loud, too heavy. I reviewed that show. I was already a journalist by the time I seen him at the Garden, and I likened him to a big, clotting dinosaur. Whose foots are like this, and it was indistinguishable. But Tull always had a penchant for perfect sound, whether it was on CD or whether it was live. I'll never forget when, what's the one with Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day? War Child came out. Carrie bought it the day it came out, and he ran over to my house, and we listened to it together for the first time, and we freaked out at the detail, the trebles. That it was just fabulous.
What was the reaction as a journalist when things would sort of branch off from rock? Because you talked about FM, but shortly thereafter you'd have glam rock, T-Rex, David Bowie, New York Dolls, even into the punk, into the pop punk that had the rock and roll roots, but were different. How did you cover that as a journalist? And was it difficult to cover something that wasn't as mainstream? Was there any pressure as a journalist to stick to the big stuff, the big hits like Led Zeppelin or Elton John or that type of act?
By the time punk came around, by the time glam came around, I had a staff. Mm-hmm. And my staff knew a lot more than me. I was stuck in an Allman Brothers, Elvis, canned heat, blues rock kind of bag. And I never really left it. But then I started discovering other bands through my writers. One writer would tell me, hey, there's this unsigned band playing CBGBs. They're called The Police. Can I go review them? I said, fine. Okay. So we had like one of the first reviews of The Police in the country at the Aquarian, plus other things. And I wound up, though, loving David Bowie and loving the new, except when I was asked to sing those songs. I remember being in a band and they wanted me to do it. I've been in bands my whole life since high school singing, and I had to sing Suffragette City. Besides the fact that there were 1,000 words in the song, it was too high for me. Give me some Allman Brothers, Give me some blues. I used to love to sing John Lee Hooker's Sugar Mama, Sugar Mama. I can't be singing no Led Zeppelin. And neither can Robert Plant anymore because they've offered him billions to rejoin.
Well, Mike's musical taste is very diverse, going back, jazz, blues, classical. And were you able to take the leap of faith into the punk new wave era?
I like the Ramones because how do you not like Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat? What a great song. And so I like the Ramones. I thought the Sex Pistols were pure garbage. Certain ones, I like the Clash. You gotta like the Clash. They utilized some reggae in the Clash. I liked the Jam. They were good. Paul Weller and company. I changed with the times, but around in the late 80s and in the 90s, there ain't no rock bands that I liked. I never understood why people like U2, for instance, or Pearl Jam or the Dave Matthews Band. I tried. I would say to myself, ooh, I know this is good. I'm supposed to like this. And I would come home from New York City on the bus and have it on my headphones and go, oh, I don't get it. So that's when my aptitude for rock atrophied and my adventurism in music enlarged to these genres that Carrie's talking about. I became a huge jazz fan, a country fan, folk music, Latin, gospel, blues, soul, funk. I sort of left rock behind. And now I still go back to the tried and true favorites when it comes to rock. I mean, the last few rock bands I love, Cheap Trick, the Cars I love. But there's nobody. Los Lobos I love. I suppose I could rattle off a bunch of them, but mostly I like the Kinks, the earlier ones.
Did MTV, gonna take you through Carrie's questions here with pop and punk and pop punk. Did MTV make it more accessible to your line of work, or did that accelerate the burnout that you felt of some of these groups you didn't like so much?
Never watched it.
Never watched it? Okay.
I had my staff. We even had a column, music on video or whatever it was called. It was an ancillary thing. It never dented my consciousness at all.
Interesting. Yeah, there was a lot of groups. Even Toll hopped in the video game at one point, right?
You had to. You had to in the 80s. If you were putting out a new album, you put out a video. So
yeah, and there was that wave, Mike. I'm sure you remember whether it was the Dead with Touch of Grey, whether it was the Beach Boys with Kokomo. There was that wave right from 84 to 88 where all those groups that were on Woodstock had one more hit. And it was weird. Kind of.
The listeners can't see it. You were giving the stink nose to the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, the Grateful Dead is probably the worst band in history. To their credit, they had two of the greatest albums in American rock history, forerunners of the Americana movement. American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. And those two albums are pristine, and they're still on my lifelong rotation. But at Woodstock, they were awful. And I remember yelling at them, "Get off the stage! You suck!" And they did that song by the Bobby Blue Bland Blues Band, "Turn On Your Love Light." But they did it for 45 minutes. And they weren't funky. They weren't soulful. They were just doodling for 45 minutes. And unbeknownst to me, Creedence Clearwater Revival was to go on next. They're backstage and they're saying to themselves, what are these guys doing? These guys are selfish. And they knew the Dead. They're both from San Francisco. And they were awful. And then another time, and Carrie might have been with me, Robert F. Kennedy Stadium in Washington, D.C. with the Dead, the band, and the Allman Brothers. And the band and the Allman Brothers were unbelievable. And I had to suffer through that Grateful Dead. Maybe you need to be tripping to like the Grateful Dead. The thing about, and Carrie will tell you, back then, we always thought that a band was really wonderful if they sounded like the record. That was the big thing. At Woodstock, when the band came on, even in that cavernous sheep meadow field, they sounded perfect. The three-part harmonies of the band. And then, like never before, no other band ever switched instruments. after every song. The drummer would come out and play the banjo. The guitarist would go behind the drums. The organ player would play an accordion. I mean, I'd never forget the band. And Carrie's one of the favorites too.
Yeah, and it's funny that not only the performance of the band at Woodstock is not on the video or the record. Mm-hmm. Neither is the Dead. Mm-hmm. And there's some other.
Yeah, CCR's not on there either.
Right, CCR's not on there.
But I've always, the band is a go-to for me.
Oh yeah.
Of all time.
George Harrison wanted to quit the Beatles and join the band. He had left.
So did Van Morrison came over there too. They wanted
Van Morrison. He saw what they were doing up in Woodstock, New York, where the atmosphere was easygoing and they were making music and the vibe was so cool. And he went back to England and the Beatles were hating each other and it was fraught with tension. He wanted to join the band. But then you got to realize the band, as long as they were, and how great every album were, they really had only two, like the Grateful Dead, they only had two wonderful records. And Levon would be the first to tell you. And he would go even further. And he would say they're only good two records, or the first two, the band and Music from Big Pink. After that, I remember when that album with Carnival came out, maybe that was the name of it, that third album. What was it called?
Stage Fright.
That third album. And I remember saying, this is like disappointing. I've learned to love it through the years, as I learned to love all the ones that Robbie Robertson wasn't even on, like Moondog Matinee or Jericho or any one of a number. But those first two albums, masterpieces.
And I think a lot of it has to do, you know what? You were there when they did Rock of Ages.
Yeah, at the Academy of Music.
At the Academy of Music, the Palladium. In 71, the band did Rock of Ages, bringing in a horn section, basically the same horn section that was part of the Johnny Carson Tonight. Seriously, was part of the Tonight.
Also, Taj Mahal used that horn section with Howard Johnson on tuba and some of these other guys. The Brecker brothers, I think, might have been in there. But yeah, the way the band used horns.
Well, with that, Mike, that when that Rock of Ages album came out, which was a live album. Mm-hmm. And I listened to it all, when we sit out by the pool, I'll always put it on. It just worked. So that their legacy was kept alive through their live performances.
Good point.
Sort of like Tull's was.
Yeah, good point. No doubt about it. Well, Tull became a laughingstock, and it wasn't even their fault when they were awarded the best heavy metal album. Metallica for Crest of a Knave. And then when they asked the Grammy guy, he mentioned that, it's supposed to be best hard rock / heavy metal album, but it's not even hard rock. Now, it's a great record. I love Crest of a Knave. But I mean,
it was sort of a lifetime achievement award by the Grammys to give to Tull. It was better than giving it to AC/DC.
Metallica got really bent out of shape.
They got it the next year. They got it the next year. That's all right.
Let's go back to Woodstock. Your book is 50 years back to the farm, and you were there, Mike. You were at Yasgurs Farm, and take me back. How early did you get there? We've all seen the news coverage of the cars piling up and the mud and this and that, and more people than expected, and counterfeit tickets. That's the rumors and this and that. How'd you get your tickets? How do you know it was happening? How early did you show up? And walk us through some of your more fond experiences there.
I worked at Concord Insurance downtown Newark, and we had a FM radio on all day, and we heard the commercials. And we're thinking, oh my God, all our favorite bands in one weekend at one place? We got to go. So we went to the Last Straw, a head shop in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and we bought tickets, $17.50 for all 3 days.
Wow.
And we went Thursday. The show started Friday. We went Thursday in the morning. My mom packed about 16 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we had, there was no bottled water back then. We had canteens filled with water. We had, clothing and pot and soap and toothpaste and toothbrushes. We were prepared. We had a tent. We had sleeping bags. We did it right. And we went up there Thursday morning, and we got to that little road, 17B, I believe, that highway leading into Bethel, and it just stopped dead. And we wound up playing a game of Monopoly on the roof of the car in the hot sun. I recently reconnected with the guy that I went to Woodstock with to ask him if we ever finished that game of Monopoly. He didn't remember. But then we continued onward, crawling, inching towards the place. And the security, weren't really security people, these guys showed us where to park. So we parked, and my friend Neil goes, well, we better take all our stuff with us. I go, don't worry about it. We'll come back. We'll get the stuff. Let me just roll a quick joint, and we'll go. And we stood there, and we didn't know where the stage was. Like, where's Woodstock? And so we hitched a ride with this Volkswagen Bug. There was 17 hippies already in the Bug when they stopped for us.
How could it go anywhere?
He was down the hill. The parking lot, I realize now, because 50 years later, I went back to the site. There's a wonderful museum on that site. And I didn't realize that the parking lot was just right up the hill from the stage. We were foolish. Wow. Anyway, so he said, you can't get in the car, but stand on the bumper thing, on the running board, and hold on like this, and we'll head down. And so we did. And that Bug tore down that hill. I thought I was going to die. And I fell off the thing on the bottom, dusted myself off, and we see the stage the night before. They're still working on the stage the night before the concert. And I thought, oh man, I gotta smoke a joint. Well, oh my God, where should I smoke a joint? I can't be seen smoking a joint. I didn't know. Nobody knew what we were heading into. So I went in the woods. I surreptitiously smoked the joint. And we got a spot, boy. Oh, did we get a spot? Right there. There it was. Wow. And we had a great time that night. We fell asleep. And I woke up and I stood up and I looked behind me. I freaked out. A vista of humanity behind me like I've never seen before in my life. Wow. Never been in a place with that many people in my life. And I roused Neil, who was still sleeping. I said, look. It's supposed to start at 9 a.m. We were ready, and everyone started crowding around us. And there was no music at 9 a.m. or 10 or 11 or 12 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they first started the show. 8-hour wait, and no artist wanted to be the first one because of the opening. Richie Havens. Right. And it's interesting that his was one of the most iconic sets of everybody, and it was the very first one, and he was brilliant. Now, we knew Richie Havens. He was that black folk singer that opened up for John Lee Hooker at the Cafe Wah. We had seen him a lot of times. We didn't think it was any great shakes, but man, was he great. And people were scared to go on first. Tim Hardin, who wrote If I Were a Carpenter, and The Lady Came from Baltimore, and all these beautiful songs. And I love Tim Hardin. And he was so stoned out on heroin that he was lying underneath the stage immobile. He couldn't perform first. And the other people wouldn't go. They just wouldn't go on. So Richie Havens, yep.
Well, what, I know this is all chronicled in the book, but so we're talking the festival starts Friday at 5.
Correct.
When did those crazy rainstorms come?
Well, it rained every day of Woodstock, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it had rained 17 of the 21 days previous to Woodstock. Yeah. Sullivan County set the record for rain that August. But the rain, for instance, during beautiful Melanie's set, where she sang the song Beautiful People, and she saw the people lighting up candles out there. Who would bring candles to Woodstock? That's the only thing I always did. There was no cell phones. What were they lighting? Matches? But she saw it, and it was a beautiful moment. It rained lightly, and I liked the rain. It was fine. It was warm. And then Saturday, when the rain came, it was fine. It was warm. What you're asking about is the horrific monsoon that tore through the place on Sunday. And it just happened to occur when the acid that I took was starting to come on. And Neil left to go find a phone booth to call our moms and tell them we were all right. So I was alone. And then after Joe Cocker said, I thrilled to Joe Cocker. That may be the best set of Woodstock. I thrilled to Joe Cocker, tripping, having so much fun. But as the sky darkened, it was so dark. After Joe Cocker said, you can see it in the movie, they're all pointing to the sky. And then the announcement came, hey, listen, we're going to take a break. We got to cover the instruments. Hang tight. Hold on to your neighbor. Do whatever you got to do. Be an hour or two. It was 4 hours.
Wow.
And there was no music. And that's when I first developed the theory that I have for the rest of my life, that as long as the music is playing, everything will be all right. Because after the music came back and I was freezing and I was wet and I was hungry and thirsty and I had to go to the bathroom, and my friend Neil stayed straight the entire time. And every new band that came on, he would go, oh no, another band. Can we go home? And I'm tripping. There's no way I'm going to go home.
Spanish chocolate. You're going to walk
all these people, the band, Johnny Winter, these people, I had to go. We stuck it out. We stuck it out until about 2:00 in the morning when they introduced Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Now, we had loved their debut album, Child is Father to the Man, with Al Cooper. Man, that's a great album, and it stands up today. But there was no Al Cooper. They kicked his ass out of his own band. And here's this new guy. What the hell is his name? The guy,
Clayton Thomas.
Oh, the stupid David Clayton Thomas. He comes on and he sings that horrible, stupid spinning wheel song. And me and Neil looked at each other. Goodbye. And Neil goes, but what about Jimi Hendrix? I said, fuck Jimi Hendrix. We got to get out of here.
Did you make it for Santana?
Oh, yeah. Santana
They were an unknown act. The only reason, and I learned this from your book, the only reason they got on the bill was because the promoters of Woodstock wanted the Dead, and they had to do that through Bill Graham, but Bill Graham would only give them the Dead if you tried it. I got this new hot act from San Francisco, and boy, was Bill Graham right. So you probably didn't know Santana, or did
incorrect.
Oh.
I was one of the few people at Woodstock that knew all about Santana. Now, mind you, their debut album hadn't even been released yet. Right. But I knew them because I had gone to the Singer Bowl on the site of the old World's Fair, where the big Unisphere. The Unisphere was. And I saw they opened up for a band called Pacific Gas and Electric. Okay. And the headliner was the Buddy Miles Express. And I had loved Buddy Miles and Electric Flag with Michael Bloomfield. And so we went to that show, and we were turned on to Santana, and Santana just blew us away a week prior to Woodstock. Wow. So I knew all about it. As a matter of fact, I said to Neil, I saw this band last week. I'm going to go buy a hot dog. And I went around and I tried to find the hot dog stand.
Here come the hot dog man.
I stick out. And that's when I found out. The guy goes, we run out of hot dogs. Sorry. I go, fine. Well, where's the next stand? He goes, no, you don't understand. There's no more food. Nobody has any food. Oh, well, can I get a soda? Nobody has any soda. Oh, okay. Well, I got to go to the bathroom. Where's the nearest bathroom? Oh, the bathrooms they're not working. And that's when I realized, uh-oh. And the thing about Woodstock, and I got to say it, is that you can't get 500,000 people together with not enough food, not enough water, not enough bathrooms, the horrible conditions, the monsoon, not one reported instance of violence, not one. And we were the peace and love generation, right? We proved it on those 4 days. Everyone helped each other. It's a cliche, and I know I sound cliche, but yeah, these people around me, they fed me, they kept me warm, they lit fire. Guys that you would be scared to meet on a dark street in Newark wound up being the nicest guys in the world and going into action. I was one of the guys that just stood there looking around. I didn't help nobody. I was just so aghast at the surroundings. And it led me to become a music journalist, because when I left Woodstock, all I did was tell people about it for weeks and weeks. And I'm still doing that, listening to music and telling people about it at 70.
Well, let's take an inside peek at your book. Is there any, I know there's a couple acts that were originally booked or approached to be in Woodstock that did not end up making the gig for one reason or another. Out of that pool, is there one group that could have been the cherry on top of what would have been, there
were so many. And the Doors were asked to play Woodstock. Morrison was afraid of being assassinated. He said no. Simon and Garfunkel were supposed to play Woodstock. It was during their tour, but they hated each other so much that they couldn't stand to do one more show. Jethro Tull was supposed to be at Woodstock, but when he learned that it was a bunch of naked hippies doing drugs, he said, I ain't doing that. Tommy James and the Shondells was supposed to be at Woodstock, but he was in Hawaii at Diamond Head, the most beautiful place on earth. And he gets a call from his agent saying some pig farmer in upstate New York wants you to do a rock festival. And Tommy James says, yeah, right. And he said no. And there were other artists, plenty of other artists. The Faces were supposed to, Rod Stewart had gone solo, and that messed up that. There were other acts, so many acts that were supposed to play Woodstock.
I saw an interesting documentary last night, and the only person that possibly might know about this, one of the few people, would be you. And it's a documentary. It's on Hulu. Our producer and our good friend AJ turned us on to it. Did it have a title, AJ?
Summer of Soul?
Summer of Soul. Mike, there was a festival. It was in Harlem. And there was a small park, like on 100, not Central Park, like on 115th Street. I've never heard the name of this. This must have been a shady. And they ran a festival, every weekend?
Yeah.
Like every weekend during the day, including Sly, including Nina Simone, including Stevie Wonder. And they've just recovered this footage 50 years later. Did you know anything about this Harlem?
Here's an interesting thing about that. Why no one knows about Black Woodstock to this day. I'm a journalist from New York. I didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it. Why is this? Did they squelch it on purpose? Questlove found the tapes after 50 years. And he put together this documentary that's on Hulu called Summer of Soul, with Gladys Knight and the Pips and Mahalia Jackson and Ray Barretto. So many artists. But the difference between Black Woodstock and White Woodstock is Black Woodstock was filled with rage and politics. And they were so upset. Say what?
Jesse Jackson was all over it.
Yeah.
He was a baby face, sort of.
Yep.
I don't want to interrupt.
No, that's fine. It was so filled with rage. They had asked him about man landing on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And these black people were going, Whitey's going to the moon. Who cares? Feed the black kids. Nina Simone got on stage and told the 100,000 people that they should buy guns and kill white people. She said it right from the stage. You got to learn to kill and burn buildings. And you know what? I could understand black rage. And I can understand the sentiment behind that. No doubt. But I saw it. It was great.
Oh, I'm glad you saw it. Well, there was AJ and I went hog wild when right during the festival, like was the same time we landed on the moon, the Apollo mission.
Yeah.
And as Mike was just referring to, they were interviewing some of the fans who are like, who gives a shit? Let's put the money into the community.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, on stage at the festival is the great Moms Mabley.
What?
Yes, right?
No way.
Moms Mabley, she goes, yeah, him, man. So that man land on the moon, some white man. I told him I'm getting off in Baltimore.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, that's awesome.
So
Yeah, how could
when it was happening, you weren't aware of it, though.
I wasn't aware of it in the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s either, or when it was happening. It's like that other thing of Black history that was refused to be taught. 1921, Omaha, Nebraska, when these two white guys went to try to lynch a Black person but couldn't find him. And instead, they burned down the whole town. Black Wall Street, they had fabulous restaurants and lawyers and churches, and it was a whole unbelievable society that Blacks had in Omaha, Nebraska, burnt to the ground. Never, and history books omitted it.
Yeah, I believe you're talking about Tulsa, Mike.
Tulsa.
Yeah,
Right. That's it.
I had very progressive history teachers who did their best to educate about those sort of things. That was never taught to me in high school. It was never part of the curriculum. Yeah, I don't think it's at their fault. It's one of the things that I think we, with a wink and a nudge, unfortunately, have pushed out of history, which needs to come back. And I'm glad that we're getting some more awareness around those things.
Well, right. Mike was brought up in a very racially mixed community. Mm-hmm. He was on the border of Newark with his mom, my Aunt Reba, Uncle Gunny.
All right, yeah.
And Debbie, and it used to be a Jewish neighborhood, but it was this is in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And it was, I mean, when you were going to Weequahic High School, what was the percentage of Black-white racial split?
It was all Black. 64 to 68. It had been all Jewish all through the 40s and 50s. And it was run by a guy named Longy Zwillman, the boss in Newark. And he used to buy turkeys for the poor Jews on Thanksgiving. My mother had a big crush on him. He was a real handsome guy. But he was a gangster. And I was warned when I finished the 8th grade in Maple Avenue School. I told people I'm going to Weequahic High School. They go, oh, man, Weequahic High School. You better watch out. And indeed, I had a guy that every time I saw him in the hall, I had to give him a quarter. I must have given him 1,000 quarters over the 4 years that I went there. And it came a point, he didn't even have to ask me. If I saw him from across the hall, I would go up to him and I would give him the quarter. And if it wasn't for the great George Davis, who was on the football team, another Black guy who became my protector, I don't know what would have happened to me. But George Davis was interesting in that his head was shaped like a football. He had a point in the front, and he had a point in the back. They had to make a special helmet for him.
Oh my God!
And he was my friend.
That's good. Did that? Howard Stern talks a lot about how he went to a similar makeup of a high school in Long Island, and it helped him broaden his horizons with music. Was there what was the positive cultural impact of that? I mean, obviously you were going to folks that didn't look like you, that had different tastes. That you talked about Black Woodstock. Did you get exposed to any of the music faster or quicker, or any of the deeper cuts that way?
Oh, no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, I had a band in high school called the Rock Garden, and I looked at our set list, and for a bunch of white Jewish guys, we played Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave. We played the Temptations. We played the Four Tops. The Rock Garden played all this Black music. Mitch Ryder, the Detroit Wheels was big, even though he was white. The Righteous Brothers. We played a lot of soul music. And I think that's because of that era. I even remember where I was when Otis Redding's plane went down. Oh. I was at the Y playing knock hockey. And over the radio, Otis Redding died today. Well, I had never heard Otis Redding. But after he died, I checked him out. And he's now my favorite soul singer of all time.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out. I've discovered a few artists like that as well.
Like what?
Including Carrie's favorite, Nipsey Hussle, who's a rapper that recently passed away.
I've never even heard of him. Nipsey Russell's a comedian.
No, Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, Nipsey.
Nipsey Hussle. He's good, but I didn't know about him, honest to God's truth, until he passed away. And then they get publicity, and it's unfortunate that they passed away. But suddenly he's a bigger star now than he ever was when he was living. It's wild how that can work.
Well, one of the things that they let us do that they don't do anymore, when Public Enemy was big, the rap band, they played Attica, the prison. And some enterprising publicist thought it would be cool to take a bunch of us journalists to Attica inside. And we went. And we were told you can talk to the prison. I mean, we were right in Gen Pop. I mean, we were right there with the prisoners. And they said, you can talk to the prisoners. That's fine. The one thing you can't ask, don't ask them why they're in there, what they did. Just don't do that. And so we're watching the show. And then the Public Enemy, the guy, remember the guy with the big clock around his... Flavor Flav. Right. He starts going on this anti-Semitic rap about how the Jews own the media and the Jews own this, and the prisoners are starting to go, yeah, fuck them Jews. And I'm like standing there, I'm like looking around, oh shit. And I also remember it was it was so hot in Attica that I was sort of relieved when we went. And I got back to Port Authority and I'm drenched in sweat. And I got online to go on the bus and I see a guy I haven't seen in like a couple of years. And he goes, Greenblatt, where are you? I go, I just got out of Attica, man. And he's like, oh shit. But yeah, I'll never forget that. So, black music, it was always a part of our experience. No doubt.
Awesome. And talking about experiences, we'll tie it up here. We'll put a bow on things. Carrie's experiences are coming your way in print, hopefully soon. I know we've been pushing Carrie along, and you've been great at editing and nudging folks along. Carrie's told me there's interviews from Adam Cole, from Kevin Owens, from the Young Bucks, from you name it. If they've been
Steve Carino, Kevin Steen, Spanky, Jay Lethal, the Briscoes, Joe Kopp, Gary Juster, so on, Mick Foley, so on and so forth.
Yeah, they all lined up to be part of this book because of their love for Carrie. And I got to say that this man that you're sitting next to has lived 5 lifetimes. I mean, there's nobody. And I thought we have a mutual friend, Palermo, and me and Palermo were always saying, did you ever meet anybody like Carrie? And I'm going, no, because this guy with the music and this and that, and he flouts tradition and he flouts legalities. And his book, and he even said to me the other night, man, I don't know if I'm comfortable with all these stories you got to me. Maybe we should tone it down a little bit. And I'm going, yeah, but that's the selling point. This guy did it all. Drugs deals, scalping tickets, cheating families down in New Orleans. We have these tickets, and these poor families want to go see this college football game, and he sells them the bogus tickets and runs away real fast. True. He was using back then. He was on drugs. I mean, this guy, how could he even be alive today? It's amazing. So that's why this book, a lot of people are going to like this book. But I got to convince him to keep a lot of those stories in there that don't make him look too good. But I'm thinking the concept of the anti-hero. He could be I could see him doing these talk shows, promoting the book on a book tour and being the anti-hero. And as far as the gay stuff, I mean, this is 2021, man. That's hip. This is good. This is another selling point. So I'm all in favor of more cock in the book, not less.
That's the what do they call the subtitle? Last Stop Penn Station, more cock. I've been working on Carrie with that also to get that right under the.
Mike's a married man, actually twice. But that's right.
That's true.
But he was old enough that besides being able to go to the Fillmore, going into New York City, it was right at when Mike was 19 and 20, it was right when the X-rated boom came out. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have the billboards with Deep Throat, before that. But all of a sudden, Mike, one day, all of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue is XXX. The hookers were there before that, but they were lined up. Did you see any of that stuff?
Nope. I came out of work. I went right into Port Authority, right back home.
That eliminates about 30 more of our follow-up questions. So you're getting off easy this time, Mike.
That's all right.
Oh, well, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you. We really look forward to reading Last Stop Penn Station, the book, which we've been nudging Carrie along. I'm thankful to you because this is something that I know Carrie has really wanted to do over the years. Carrie and I met in 2013, and I think he started talking about maybe writing a book in 2015. So for at least 6 years, he's wanted to do this. And I'm glad that, you've been here, somebody with your credentials to help guide him along, help edit and bring his story to life.
Well, I got to tell you, we leave no stone unturned.
And we're going to bring Mike back
Absolutely.
in a couple of weeks because we didn't even touch the word wrestling.
That's right.
Oh, my God. From Puerto Rico to Ring of Honor. I mean, we WWF. Don't wait, WWF, whatever it was. Yeah, we got to talk about wrestling.
There's the man that turned me on to wrestling.
There you go.
We'll get into some of that, some more music stuff. There's Mike's a wealth of stories and true stories.
Yeah,
and it's good stuff.
Awesome.
So we appreciate you doing this with us, Mike.
My honor.
So. If you're unfamiliar with Mike G, it's Mike Greenblatt. Back to Yasgurs Farm.
Mm-hmm.
Always good with the anniversary of Woodstock coming up every year.
51 coming up.
51 or
52?
52. Oh, wow. Okay, 52. That's right.
Available on Amazon. And thanks for coming on Last Stop Penn Station, my man.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative.